Gueorgui Naumov умря преди 20 години днес. Той живее в нас. Gueorgui Naumov died 20 years ago today. He lives in us. He was a tireless parent to 2 sons. He was a tireless educator to so many medical doctors. He was a tireless human being to all his friends. He also was a musician who published a treatise how to play the accordion for generations of musicians after World War II. He published American revolutionary songs arranged like Yankee Doodle during World War II in Bulgaria under the German king. He was curious about the world, but rooted in his Bulgarian roots. He was a healer who healed so many people by giving diagnosis that most haven't seen in the X-rays technology of the time, as if he had an intuitive sense of seeing what the imagery of the time hinted. He never prospered from this. But on the other hand, he built values in all who were around him. He wrote a book about anatomy used by medical students in Bulgaria. He used to innovate with every technological advancement, which of course, as it goes, was passed by the next following one, publishing books about imagery and resonance and all the kind of cancer capacity to early diagnostics. He wasn't a cold scientist. He was a warm human being. He didn't show off his plethoric knowledge. He was not condescending to others because of his erudition. Rather, always eager to share a story, explain an anecdote, shed light about a historic event given a street corner in a place in Europe. Always something to awaken the curiosity to study, to learn. It wasn't just some kind of single-minded mind. It was rather somebody who had a mind that englobed so many contradictory thoughts of his time, where he grew up between 1923 and his death in 2005. So much has gone on between the inheritance of his artistic one, meaning paintings of his grandfather's, my grandfather, his father, Vladimir Naumov, after whom my son is named, Just like my daughter is named after my teacher Nadia Boulanger. But when you name children after the names of people who are so meaningful in your past, it's not to bestow some weight on them, it's rather to make a hyphen connection. After all, we all have a short crossing, for some shorter than others, of this earthly life. And in the case of his father, Vladimir, the painter, he was 47 years and 2 world wars as a soldier. In Gueorgui Naumov's case, he carried an X-ray portable machine all the way through the Trans-Siberian in the 50s to China and Korea after World War II, and shared so much of his knowledge with the young doctors there after he was himself, of course, a young doctor in a rural village in Bulgaria, in Pirgovo, about which he also wrote a novel, The Tales of a Young Doctor in a Village, already back in 1948. He also was visionary because for the first black and white channel of television in Bulgaria in the early 50s, he inaugurated a medical educational show where he was explaining pathologies to the large audience, always this desire to educate, to help understand what's going on, from the threats of life's malign situations to the spiritual uplifting of musical and mostly his own musical talents, such as oboe and violin before accordion, as his own mother, Svoboda Naumova, was a solfege teacher in Bulgaria. Everybody carries memories about their parents. Here it's more stating his own achievements in his own right. After all, before even my late birth in his life, he already lived a very filled life with the birth of my older brother and his medical research in stomach cancer, among others. There wasn't a dull moment around him. You couldn't have a meal without him encouraging the conversations to go in any direction there are, in knowledge, in curiosity, in awareness, in history. Any pretext was leading to a civilizational understanding of things, or attempting to, from food recipes to traveling to historic buildings to points of view of history from one or the other side of the countries. Since my mother was Greek, there was always discussions at dinner table about the heritage, cultural, culinary, and others from these countries which were at war for so many centuries before to be under the Ottoman Empire's rule for so many later centuries. But at no point did he limit his intellect to only the regional aspect of his background. And though he spoke mainly German, which helped him also reading so much books in that language, he developed a deep understanding about the world. Surely nobody has the expectation to be universally versed in everything. That would be pretentious. But I must say that I miss him very much for this daily awakeness to everything. There wasn't a subject that was unimportant. Everything led to something that connected to civilization, history, and yeah. I often wish that my adult children could benefit from conversations with him. I'm just a hyphen, as all generations are, I guess, between the preceding and the next, just like as a teacher, between one's own teacher and one's own students. And today, 20 years passed in my life since his passing, almost as 20 seconds. Time passing doesn't fade away the intensity of the essence of what he enlightened everybody who was around him. Of course, most people who were around him benefited from his humanity and professionalism and elegance of being and eloquence and humor and capacity to be charming and enter in conversation with all venues of people in all situations with so much intuitive intelligence and knowledge, and never pedantic. But alas, given the situation of the passing of time, all of them are gone, or most of them are gone. This Sixth Symphony by Tchaikovsky was, like for many, one of his favorite pieces of the human soul's expression, which is why I felt compelled to play it for him today. The Tales of Pirgovo, a novel by Gueorgui Naumov. Chapter 1, December 1948. The days prior to New Year's Eve, snowfall and coldness. But I feel warm and ecstatic. A young doctor who had just finished the residency and is going back to this village. I'm traveling from Sofia to Russe with the 9th train, 2nd class. I'm excited for my first day of a self-employed career, a day I had been preparing for since the beginning of my university adventure 5 years ago. I doze off and wake up, freezing in my cabin. A few more stops left before we reach Russe. I blow hot air against my ice-cold hands, hoping I would warm up. At some point, the door slides open and two large villagers enter with their coats, bringing the cold with them. Their mustaches are frozen, cheeks redden, and their breath reeking of grape brandy. Later on, they had explained to me that they had fueled themselves with that beverage in an attempt not to freeze as they waited at the railway station. Where are you heading to, boy? They inquired. From their mouths, along with noises expelled, came also steam which melted the ice resting against their mustaches. I explained, though I find it extremely difficult to move my mouth, I barely managed to utter out the name Mejden, and they had already understood this as no day. Where to did you say, doctor? In no day? But it's only night time there. They wait for my answer. They're aware that I too perhaps lacked an adequate amount of geographical knowledge concerning Dobruja's locations. But they decided that we should settle it somewhere on the edge of the earth. They even pitied me. Well, I hope we all reach Russe on time before the tram leaves the train station. What? I wonder, there is a tram in Russe? I had never known. We arrive, and everything became clear. Waiting before the train station was a grimy old bus that the citizens of Russe have decided to call a tram, in an attempt to sound more presentable and metropolitan. With its help, I reached an area around the post office. I got off with my suitcase in hand and my covered in snow streets for my feet, making my way towards the country doctor's office. For me, it was the highest of institutions, housing the district's medical office, even though it was a small, shackled home and did not have the facade of a medical facility. Dangling on the door handle was a large rusty lock. Around me rested a wave of complete silence. Even the early rising citizens were still sleeping. Yet a young doctor who was studied, worked tirelessly, and trembled over examinations has arrived, and it's currently freezing in the cold, in the name of greater good of humanity. I was already going through the freezing stage when a young but plump woman, wrapped in a huge coat, stood in front of me and stated, "You're not some newly arrived doctor, are you?" And as I said yes, she opened the door with one strong push of her powerful body. The padlock was just a hoax. "Ha! Come in and warm up, because the way you're freezing, I'm not going to know what to do with you." Her hospitable welcoming plucked me out of my stone-cold stance, and the waves of the heat expelled from the burning stove caressed my face. The aroma of linden blossom tea blew towards me, and then I don't remember anything. I fell asleep due to the sudden change from cold to hot. At some point, I felt as though someone was gently nudging me. I drowsily look up, and it's her, my savior, the one who saved me from the White Death. Conspiratorially, she whispered, "Doc, wake up!" While you sleep, you remember about Mejden. The original governor is here. Get ready so I can take you to him. Then you're going to be quiet and done. You will only answer with yes to whatever I say to him. We went into the original Dr. Kotokov's office. Before I managed to open my mouth, she had already begun. Chief, why should this young doctor be sent all the way to Mejden? Look, he will die there. Why not appoint him at Pirgovo? Where else? Besides, he has just graduated, meaning he knows the newest information about medicine. The others, well, you know, all these years and they still know the same old stories. Nothing new. Who the others were, I had no idea. But I understood that this was to do with my colleagues, the district doctors. I never even got the chance to hear the regional doctor's voice. He just nodded in affirmation and accepted without rejection the grounds of his first assistant, Lyuba, the lab technician of the sanitation station. The name figuring out of the nameplate on the door. We settled the formalities rather quickly, one signature for accepting the position, and here I am, a district doctor in the village of Pirgovo, in Russe. I had a chief and a first known colleague. At that point, I didn't know that after years I would meet again Lyubka, who was married then to Dr. Pamukov, my X-ray student at the Isul Hospital for Cancerology, and also with Dr. Kotokov, who suffered from gallbladder cancer later, therefore coming to find me in the same hospital for a cure. So I could perform a professional radiologist cholecystography. 17 years later, after my first time meeting with him in the 5th edition of the Shinz magazine in German language, the X-ray taken by me of him will be published. A photograph that brought me international fame as a radiologist. But at that point, all of this was unknown to me, as it's in everyone's future. For now, it was December 25th, 1948, and I was just mere district doctor. Hadn't even gotten the chance to see my job site, and that same evening I left for Pirgovo. My father recorded, back when I was 4 or 5, this folkloric Bulgarian inspiration of mine, which he titled The Quiet Street of Tryavna, an ancient street in a small, very picturesque village in Bulgaria that has a very decorative house, which was painted by his father, Vladimir Naumov, in the late days of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th, and which was represented artistically through this painting in the apartment in Sofia. And naturally, lifting my eyes, I improvised something that I heard from this painting. And my father took it on dictation from the recording and made it into a handwritten score for me to practice. It is a piano piece, just like the other pieces I had started to play when I started my piano lessons with Professor Liliana Panayotova in Sofia when I was 5. Hence I remember it, because the written leaves a mark. The heard dissipates in the air. And I thank him for having done so with so much devotion, attention, time, and desire to preserve something fleeing coming from my child soul in music. And I must say that so much respect for a young child who's only a vague promise in any aspects of their inclinations. Later, a few years after, when I was 7, Mademoiselle Boulanger in Paris continued to do so in more professional ways with her assistant, Mademoiselle Annette Dieudonné, where I learned how to notate my thoughts. My father notated them for me. Gueorgui Naumov loved folkloric Bulgarian music. As an ethnomusicologist, he loved the paintings of rural Bulgaria, which were painted by his father, Vladimir Naumov, and also where his mother, Svoboda Naumova, taught solfège or ear training and music grammar in regular schools, traveling all over the country as well as abroad. A life is like a puzzle of so many pieces, and father's life's puzzles were quite puzzling to his 2 generations, almost sons, since we were so apart in age. Nikolai, his firstborn son, and me, Emil, his second-born son. I think he was a different father because he was at a different age. And the medical aspect of his scientific approach of everything in life translated in Nikolai becoming also a very great medical doctor. And the writings about medicine of Gueorgui Naumov, which were published from anatomy to all kinds of research for various medical advancements in imagery and applied to diagnostics in cancerology were also met with his profound musicianship. He had a relative pitch. He didn't have a perfect pitch, but the intervals were clear to him. And I recall as a young child when he was driving in the Ford Taunus white and black bird with chromes, which I was shining when the car was parked. We were singing games on solfeging tunes from one theme to another, and time always passed with incredible curiosity and occupation for the intellectual awakening and emotional drive towards also the responsibility to complete one's tasks, which he was an example of because of his encyclopedic mind and his erudite being. He was constantly a pedagogue in daily, every minute life. I think he was always there to awaken the neurons, and he spent all his free time writing. I think that the orality for him was important because he spoke very good Russian, very good German, naturally Bulgarian, but not that great French, and quasi no Greek, which was the language of mother tongue of my mother, with whom they shared differently things because of my auspicious childhood, which brought them to leave Bulgaria for the opportunity of mine to study with Nadia Boulanger when I was 7. And therefore, Nikolai remained in Bulgaria and with his mother. And these two sons and these two professions or callings that are medical and musical were in fact his own two lines of life, his paths, his yearnings, and he didn't give up any for the other with the accordion book or the arrangements that he did of songs, and constantly writing texts and putting them in music. Every trip, every curiosity of every culture. And I think that to have two sons who became a musician and a doctor in medicine was sort of his two lifelines. I find also very touching that he took so much time to be a great parent. Not only the educator, but also very spontaneous and very driven, almost theatrical sometimes, in the sense that I recall him staging at home a Tchaikovsky symphony in its dramatic representation of an imaginary theater play, mimes, which triggers, of course, emotional imagination, but also dramatic associations between the language of music with the meaning of the life's passing time. and missing in distance and hoping and longing. And that was something that was taught through the example of his courage when he had to live away in order to satisfy the daily needs for my studies in Paris, because he couldn't exercise in France. So he was in Germany writing audio cassette radio theaters where he was communicating lots of myths about composers, of writers, and conveying all this to me as a child in Paris. In times where the communications were not easy, phone calls were rare and expensive, and he was into the essence of things. And I think he was also very vigilant when I was a small child. I recall my brother having his medical examinations prepared and revised by our father. And I found all this to be extraordinary example of effervescent energy of the spirit and the mind. And despite of the conditions, despite of the separation, despite of the distance, it's a willpower and creativity and the purpose of always writing. I think this, would it be fiction or history or historic anecdotes, he was truly a man of so many trades, true Renaissance man, living by example. Nobody's perfect, of course. Everybody has, in every family, different levels of approaches towards the life paths of each member. But I must say that 20 years after his passing, his deeds, his writings, his exemplary attitude of courage in front of any difficulty, facing it bravely and honestly, and with high professional expectations of himself as well as of his children. I mean, I was born late in his life and late in my mother's life. Therefore, they already had a very rich path and in their own past before I was born. And when I tried to revisit his life before me, and I see the different trips that brought him to bring his medical advice and teaching during World War II all the way to Asia, and being always traveling with a purpose and adapting to the cultures where he discovers the different music, theater, poems, the meaning of everything for each culture, with such a great respect for this and that and there. I will never attempt to say how much I would like his spirit to be transformed through the things which his descendants do, because I find that, of course, he knew his grandchildren not that much because, of course, of age, and he saw them as youngsters, as children. For Nikolai's daughter Leni, a little older, and for our children a little bit younger, but left a very strong impact on each of them. I always feel like I would love for him to come back and to have intellectual conversations of any and many topics in the same sentence as he knew how to do with my own son, as I feel just a hyphen that cannot have his incredible drive and wealth of intellect. But I was very lucky to have known him, and I feel the same about having known Mademoiselle Boulanger, to whom he was also the doctor for in her very late age, in her 90s in Paris. And I find that, yes, I miss him very much. I missed him already when I was growing up, but the essence of his being deploys in the soul of his descendants, as they're in their own spectacular individual way, shaping their understanding of the world as he shaped his own understanding of the world, which of course evolves between time periods, even if love and hope and transmission remains essential through the ages, going through wars and changes of paradigm. Everything is, of course, evolving, and now differently than then, and who knows in the future. But I still think it's quite stunning to me that his ways of thinking, his integrity as a person, as a parent, as a professional, and as a curious mind, and his love for his country, and his incredible devotion for his children, I find that to be all incredibly commending, to live up to the expectation. And I'm very blessed and honored to have been his son, and as I'm sure my children feel about him, as well as Nikolai's and his child, now grandchild, who of course he never knew. But there are things which can be transmitted beyond the time, through us, not just memories, but perhaps ways to guide yourself in life, and to respect the others, and to be generous in your giving, and with help of some humor sustain the nonsense of it all, but make a meaningful sense for those who you love and you care for, which is what he did so beautifully and inspirationally. Благодаря ти, татко, за винаги. Thank you, Dad, forever.